So this is the conclusion and the second part to my interview with Ashley Mortimer. In this interview, Ashley talks about not only the Center for Pagan Studies, but also the Doreen Valiente Foundation and how they work together to preserve and to protect the artifacts that were left by Doreen Valiente.
All right. Okay, so I was talking to Julie Payne, and she had mentioned you for the for Interfaith, and I was joking with her on Facebook. I said he does that too, because I know you work for the Center for Pagan Studies also. So
yeah, that's me. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. That's right. No, I'm a director of the Center for Pagan Studies and a trustee of the Doreen Valiente Foundation. That's kind of where my pagan roots are. An initiate of the craft, and I'm sure most people out there who are in the pagan community will know who Doreen is, but they may not know what the Center for Pagan Studies is, which the Center for Pagan Studies was formed and founded by John and Julie while Doreen was still alive. And Doreen, the story is quite interesting. Doreen kind of contacted them and said, "Can I come to one of your meetings?" And they sort of fell all over themselves to sort of this famous pagan was coming to their event. And afterwards, Doreen approached John and said, "I like what you're doing. I like that you're putting on these talks, that you're trying to teach people the genuine, authentic way of doing things. You know, you're not trying to rip people off. You're not trying to sell them garbage on the internet and what have you." And she said, "I want to get involved." And the story goes that John said, he said, in a moment of kind of not knowing what to say to this famous lady, he said, "I just said, and how do you think you can do that?" And apparently she kind of looked at him and gave him a twinkle in the eye and said, "Well, I could wash the cups up with the cups of tea up afterwards if you like." And as it happened, that's pretty much what, you know, the way the Centre for Pagan Studies kind of took its attitude from that humbleness of somebody like Doreen. So Doreen became the patron of the Centre for Pagan Studies. When she passed on and she left her legacy in her will to John, who was also her last working high priest, John wanted to do the right thing with Doreen's legacy. He asked her, "What do you want me to do with all your stuff? You know, I'm very surprised that you want me to have it." And she said, "John, you're the person who I think will do the best thing with it and do the right thing." And he kind of took that and really didn't know what to do. And then over a couple of years, he formulated an idea that what he would do is he would make Doreen's legacy accessible to the pagan community, you know, to whom Doreen owed so much of what she felt. You know, she felt she had a great duty to the community. So he thought he might build a museum. And it was at that point, having been on a lecture tour, I saw him speak, and I was kind of, I don't know what happened. I was compelled to speak to him afterwards and introduce myself and offer to help. And I didn't really hear anything for a year or so. And then one night out of the blue, John rang me up and said, "Do you remember me?" And I kind of tugged my forelock down the phone. "Yes, Mr. Ballantyne, you know, what can I do for you?" And he said, "Do you remember offering to help me?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You're going to regret that, because I want to pay for it." And I tell you what, I've never regretted it, because he said, "I need your help. You've got some skills in business and finance and legals and accountancy and stuff." And we came up with this plan to protect the artifacts properly. And we realized the way to do that was to form a charitable trust and for John to donate the collection to the trust, so that they now belong to the Doreen Valiente Foundation, which is the name we chose. So the principle of the Doreen Valiente Foundation is that it's owned by the public. The world owns these artifacts. Yes, there's 5 of us as trustees who are trusted to take care of the affairs of it, and we've all signed a legal document that says the artifacts will never be sold, they'll never be split up, they'll always be preserved, and our other objective is to share them, is to share the access to them, so that other people can learn from Doreen's legacy. So the idea is that the Doreen Valiente Foundation is a kind of sleeping partner, if you like. It owns the artifacts, and therefore they're legally protected.
Okay, so Ashley, we were kind of interrupted a little bit earlier. We were talking about the Doreen Valiente Foundation and how the Doreen, is it the Center for Pagan Studies that has the collection of Doreen Valiente?
Yeah, no, it's the foundation was formed purely to own the collection.
Okay.
Purely to be a kind of a legal entity that owns the collection, and it doesn't do anything else really other than own the collection. That way, it can't get itself into debt or any other problem that may affect the artifacts themselves. Which is what the problem is if somebody owns something privately. So the foundation is a charitable trust, meaning that really it's owned by everybody, by the public. But there are 5 of us as trustees who are there to uphold its constitution. It's called a deed of covenant or a deed of trust. And the document says that we will never ever split the artifacts up, we'll never sell them, we'll never put them in danger, we'll always keep them in a good state of repair and preservation, and we will always share and make them accessible to the wider public, which is not just the pagan community, but everybody, because the craft and Doreen's legacy really does belong to everybody. We're a part of the religious history of our species. So if you look at where paganism is today, and as a result of Doreen's work, just look at us in the world, you know. It went from an underground cult of a few old people in the south of England and dotted about to being a major worldwide religion.
That's true.
You know, I mean, Gerald had loved that. Doreen would shudder at the thought.
So you're not going to sell Doreen Valiente's collection to Ripley's, believe it or not, huh?
It can't be sold now. We've signed this legal document that will not permit that. That's the point of a charitable trust. There will always, even long after I'm dead and John's gone and whatever else, there will always be 5 trustees who own that collection and who therefore dictate what happens to it, and who have to keep upholding the legal document that we signed that passed the ownership over. And this is what John was troubled about as an individual who owned it. He was worried about what would happen to him after he'd gone, you know, later down the line. And he said, you know, I'm still 2 generations removed from Gerald, really. This is John speaking. And he said, you know, if somebody came along and offered me $10 million for Gerald's book, I'd be thinking to myself, what could I do with that money that would make the rest of the collection safe forever? And, you know, he said that temptation for me was there. What would it be like for somebody 2 generations on from me? Right. You know, if I left it, who would I leave it to, and who would they leave it to? And eventually somebody would be so far removed from the individuals involved that they would perhaps concede to temptation. So that's why we constructed this idea of the charitable trust. So John very decently and honourably, in my opinion, donated the collection to the trust. And we had it was quite a moment when we signed the document on the altar with, you know, Doreen's stuff, and we did it properly with a ritual. And it was really something. And the result of that is that forever and ever, Doreen's legacy, and the legacy of anybody else who leaves or gives their artifacts or their collection to us, to the foundation, we can rest assured that it'll never get ill-treated. It will always be looked after and preserved. We are trying to develop a museum, and that's, you know, the biggest mountain of red tape. I know you know a little bit about this, but maybe the viewers don't. Right. We keep getting there. We keep getting somebody who's got the access to funding, got the location, the premises, the local council, the local government who are prepared to help us do this. And it keeps falling through, and it keeps falling through. But, you know, we'll never give up, ever. And in the meantime, we keep putting on the lectures and the talks and running these other things like the blue plaque schemes, so that we're keeping the collection and Doreen's legacy and Gerald's legacy in the public eye. And I think that's so important that we preserve our history and our heritage. Because meanwhile, the pagan community and the craft community is developing new people are coming into it, and they need to know where their roots are.
Yes.
You know.
And so what is the biggest hurdle now? Is it the funding for the museum? Is it a location? What is the main obstacle, I guess, would be the best.
The obstacle is having them all come together at the same time in the right place. But I mean, I don't know when this will get broadcast, but I can tell you that kind of
pretty soon.
Yeah, okay. Well, kind of exclusively, we've had another lead and another couple of opportunities that we're now going to go to some meetings within the next few weeks, which we hope will bring about the next round of things, and we'll get it. We've been down this line before, so we're trying not to get our hopes up too much, but at the same time, quite excited that back in a certain part of the UK, which I don't want to name any names, but we're in an opportunity now where there's another tangible chance of it coming. The funding would be there. And as John always says, you know, if we ask somebody privately, there are people out there, there are craft members, then there are people who would gladly donate a large chunk of money to own a museum. But it's not going to be like that. And, you know, we want it to be for the public in the same way that the foundation and the legacy is. But the idea is that the Centre for Pagan Studies will open a museum, and the foundation will lend the collection, you know, forever to the museum. So that if the museum did get into, I don't know, financial difficulties or something, then the collection would simply revert to its legal owners, the trust, which means that, it's not at risk. It's not at financial risk. So we're there, we keep trying. And in the meanwhile, we just got to keep doing these other things that keep people involved and keep the community alive and involved, like the blue plaques and the conferences that we put on and publishing the books and giving the lectures and the talks and these kind of interviews where we get a chance to, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about the foundation and Doreen's legacy and whatever else.
Well, thanks for being so patient with me. I think we had every problem in the book happen to us.
Well, the energies are there and the spirits are there, and I think the spirit was willing and the computer was weak in this case a little bit, but we overcame it, and here we are, and maybe we get a chance to do it again.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely, and we can definitely make. I think we talked earlier about this. There are some other people that I'd love to interview too, and we could probably also share this with the foundation. So you'll have these as a record too. But
certainly, these interviews are really important because some of the people involved in the history of the craft, all of us involved in the history of the craft, one day we won't be here.
Right.
Any record, any testimony, any witnessing, even these interviews are so important because once it's recorded, it's there forever. And there are people who are, we need to get to the people who perhaps won't be around as long as some others and get their witness testimony of what happened. I mean, contemporaries of Gerald are not few and far between. There's not many left, and those people are the ones who we want to hear from. But every bit of everybody who's involved in the craft, it's all part of our heritage. We're all involved, and it's the heritage of our it's human heritage, it's human religious history, and it needs to be recorded. So yeah, these interviews are really useful way of doing things, and we must do this more. We must do. So
we can wrap this up, but if you would, for about another minute and a half, talk about. I know you have the YouTube. What Doreen Valiente means to you. Is that still going on? And if
Absolutely.
People want to get involved in that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a project we launched a couple of months ago, and we will continue to do that. And really what we wanted everybody, not just the celebrity famous witches. We wanted everybody to contribute to that and say, well, just a soundbite or a minute or 2 minutes or whatever you want to contribute, just to say how you feel about Doreen and how you feel about her influence on you. Because, these people like Doreen and Gerald have influenced literally millions of people.
Yeah.
And they continue to do so. And I don't just mean initiated crafters, and I don't just mean people who call themselves Wiccan, and I don't just mean the pagan community. This has had a profound influence on society and culture in our times. And, I'm sure Doreen would kind of shy away from the publicity. I think Gerald might not. But
yeah, he'd welcome it.
I think he'd rather enjoy it. But
yeah,
so please contribute. Send us a video of you saying to us in as many words or as few as you like what you think about Doreen and how she's influenced you. And although we've already started with a few kind of well-known names, we're collecting the testimonies of everybody. So everybody who wants to stand up publicly and say, Doreen means this to me. Doreen's important because of this. Great. Send them to us. They'll go on record forever. And, hopefully one day they may be, part of a museum exhibit. They may be part of our richer and wider heritage.
All right. Well, we just have a couple of seconds left. So, Ashley, I want to thank you so much for doing this. This has been a wonderful experience for me.
Thank you. It's been an honor. It's been really nice, really lovely.
So this is the conclusion to my interview with Ashley Mortimer. I really appreciate his help in this, and it was wonderful to chat with him and to learn more about what the Center for Pagan Studies and the Doreen Valiente Foundation is doing, not only to preserve the heritage of the Wiccan community, but the pagan community as a whole. Doreen Valiente touched so many people, and it would be hard to imagine many aspects of pagan belief and philosophy without the contribution that Doreen Valiente has made to it. So I have provided links in the description below to not only the Center for Pagan Studies, but also the Doreen Valiente Foundation. And I encourage you to go there and take a look and maybe even become members of the Doreen Valiente Foundation. Thank you, and blessed be.